Okay, I'll go ahead and get started then. Before we get started with today's P&A Advertising Symposium session, we ask you join in celebrating some of the award-winning submissions from the 2021 P&A Foundation Advertising Contest. By sharing these winning entries, we hope to not only honor talent and success, but to also add to the ideas and takeaways you're receiving through this week's sessions. Each year, the Foundation's advertising contest recognizes ad departments from Pennsylvania news companies who are producing outstanding print and digital ads, as well as other revenue-generating campaigns and products. The 2021 contest was judged by members of the New York Press Association across the 4 circulation divisions. Over 320 entries were received from 20 news organizations. More than 130 have been recognized with first, second, and honorable mention awards with certificates and plaques mailed earlier this month. Today, we highlight the winners of two of the 14 categories. For the self-promotion advertising category, entrants can submit all media and marketing materials, including any digital components. Ads are recognized that promote your publication or a specific section or the industry generally, encouraging strength and growth of audience and revenue. May include print ads, radio, signs, direct mail, website, and digital ads, promoted social media, etc. In the best recruitment or commercial ad category, entrants may be print or digital, classified, or display. So congratulations to these award recipients and all of the 2021 winners. We invite you to view the compilation of all winning entries on the P&A website at www.pnanewsmedia.org. So we are now going to start the session. My name is Vanessa Coper. I'm going to help moderate here and get things started. So thank you for attending today's session of the P&A Advertising Symposium. My coworker and friend at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Jill Kirsch, will join us today to discuss the importance of optimizing your digital campaigns. During this session, you will learn how to manage clients' digital expectations, the importance of campaign setup, and how to garner insights from ad delivery reports. So just a little background. Before we begin here, they asked me to share something that I've experienced with digital campaigns. And I think as being an ad director in being in management of the ad department, there are certain things that I see happening that I'm sure Jill will address today, is retention and setting up that prep work ahead of time and understanding the expectations of the client. It's so important that you do that on the front end so that you can deliver an ROI for the client. And I think that's where sometimes our campaigns fail and we fall short because we missed a piece somewhere along the line. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Jill Kirsch.
Hey, thanks, Vanessa, and thank you to everyone for joining me today. So I'm excited to discuss the best practices for programmatic campaigns. So they are a valuable way to still drive relevant, engaged content to websites. So with crisp creative, a strong call to action, and the right targeting, programmatic can set your clients up for success and certainly improve your revenue as well. At times, we find a lot of programmatic campaigns are just set and forget. So it's really important to have attention to detail, whether you're a sales leader, a sales rep, or a campaign manager, as that will ensure that your client is pleased with the results, and your attention to detail will ensure the revenue that you work so hard to bring in will not be at risk. So before we review what we'll learn today, I just wanted to share a little bit of my background. So before joining the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I actually worked for some publishers in Michigan. My focus there was sales and business development when I joined the Post-Gazette back in 2009, what, 2009, yeah. I actually worked for our interactive media department. So that's when internet had its own department here. And I worked more on the operations side. So instead of being client and sales focused, it was more about how to monetize our website, you know, how to work with editorial on things that we were working to monetize the website, and working with marketing, and then working with an ad operations team. So now that my focus is back on client facing revenue, it's really great because I've had my hands in, you know, the ad servers, both for owned and operated and on our agency side. So a lot of the things that I've learned is all by trial and error. So today, as Vanessa mentioned, we're going to go over the importance of managing those expectations, campaign setup, as that's where it's really critical you get some things right from the beginning, and then certainly gaining insights from delivery reports. Let me go. Ooh, so here's my big disclaimer, right? There is not a hidden recipe for optimization. My suggestions will not guarantee you more revenue dramatically, right? I am human, so there likely could be a spelling error. I fixed it, one error I found this morning. So I certainly appreciate your grace of not pointing something out. So, and certainly the takeaways for each one of you are going to be really different because some of you are sales leaders, some sales reps and campaign managers. And the other variable you have is the ad server. So what ad server you use for your owned and operated campaigns, and what ad server or servers you use for your agency products. So here at the Post-Gazette, our ad server is Ad Manager 360. Some people still call it DFP or GAM. And then our agency name is Ben. And our campaign managers have access to 4 different DSPs: DV360, Simplify, the Trade Desk, GDN, and we actually have one other one. So we have a native DSP as well. So further along the presentations, I do have some really great slides for campaign managers that you'll have access to once those come out on Monday. And the other disclaimer I wanted to mention was certainly we're all selling the same square box, right? Whether it's a 300 by 250 or 320 by 50. The really big difference of everything is the sales rep and the campaign manager, right? That sales rep being able to communicate things and talking to clients about the benefits of programmatic, how to measure success, and certainly being able to share with the client the strategy of how campaigns are set up as well. So let's dive right in. Ooh, so the importance of managing the expectations. So as I've been saying, a lot of it all starts at the beginning. So in this section, we'll talk about some pre-call planning. We'll slightly go over needs analysis and client marketing goals, then getting to that setting expectations, as getting results for any business is the ultimate goal when they want to connect with you. But certainly, even the best media companies and digital agencies don't have magic powers, right? So it all starts at the beginning before you even make that discovery, that call to make the appointment for a discovery call. So let's talk about pre-call planning. Ooh, so this focus is more for sales leaders and sales reps, as we always want to make sure we do our homework before we pick up the phone or send an email, right? We all know we can gain lots of information from a client's website or their social sites about their history, any new products they may have, and certainly you can find out on social how active they are, whether that's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, right? TikTok, all of that. But there are other items you can discover as well before you make that call or send the email. Right, you can find out where they're advertising by looking them up on AdMall or Buzzboard. We'll spend some time looking at 2 Chrome extensions, Google Tag Assistance and Ghostery, as these are extensions that give you insights to what the client is or has done in the past. You can also look at, say, AdMall or Moat to see, are their ads more branding focused, or are they looking more for direct response? The other part I want to highlight is the importance of seeking to understand the digital knowledge of your client, right? So you can go on LinkedIn and certainly look to see if they're certified in AdWords or Google Analytics. But remember, those are just tests. And that doesn't mean people have had time to apply what they've learned in those tests to real life, right? To their campaigns and their website, right? And certainly, a rep and I were recently at a client to go over their 2021 agreement, right? And we'll call the client Bob. Bob said, hey, you know what? We've decided we're going to be a digital facing company. So we don't want any of those print ads anymore. We only want to talk digital. Great, Bob. We're so happy to hear that. You know, last year, so you know, Bob did a mixture, right? He did print ads, ads on our own website, and then we also did AdWords. And please note, we did meet with Bob every month to go over performance, right? And create different ads for him as well. Well, when I started talking to Bob about Google Analytics, right, and AdWords, we lost him. He's like, analytics, what is that again? Right, AdWords, I'm not doing AdWords. No, Bob, you are, right? So even, no matter how you communicate or how often, it's really important to be aware of where your client's knowledge is at, so you can make sure that you're speaking with them, right? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at Ghostery, right? Ghostery is a Chrome extension. It uncovers the trackers that are on websites. If you don't know how to add a Chrome extension, just Google it, and I'm sure there's a video that can walk you through that. So here's data from one client site, right? It basically tells us that they have Google Tag Manager on there. This is a good sign. I'm not for sure what they would have in that tag, right? I can't see in it. It could mean they just might have a remarketing pixel in there. It could mean maybe they're working with someone, and sometimes we put our own GA in a Google Tag Manager to get more information, but it's at least a good sign that something's going on, right? Here's another website. Now this one has a few more, right? And look, Simplify's on there, right? We all know Simplify is a DSP. So it looks like they have or had run programmatic display ads in the past, which is great, right? And it looks like they've also maybe invested in LinkedIn at some point, and they as well also have Google Tag Manager, right? So maybe they could be doing remarketing as well. The other extension I suggest getting is Tag Assistance, right? This gives you insight into their site analytics, conversion tracking, and remarketing. So here is one, right? They have analytics. Ooh, that blue face, right? You can actually click on it. I didn't go in depth on these slides, but sometimes they're blue or red, which means there could be an issue with how Google Analytics is on their site. Now, please note, I do not suggest calling the client and saying, hey, Bob, I saw you have analytics on your site and it's on there wrong, right? That just opens up a whole nother bag. But certainly at some point in your conversation, if you were going to move forward with them, we would want to make sure analytics is correctly put on their site, right? Because that's one of those reports, a traffic report you want to get out of analytics at a later time. But this is a good sign that, you know what I mean, they would be a prime candidate to do some digital marketing with you, and that you would be able to track some data. And here's another one, right? Just another good sign of, hey, they have remarketing, they have Google Tag Manager, and they have analytics. So now that you've done some pre-call planning, you kind of have an idea of who you're going to talk to. Maybe it looks like they're a little bit digital savvy, so you got to be on top of your game, right? You're going to want to call and make that needs analysis appointment. So certainly this isn't a time for us to do a deep dive of what a good needs analysis is like, as some of us use SWOT, some of us have our own needs analysis form. So we're going to focus more on the client marketing goals during your discovery call with them. Because I'm sure we've all been at appointments and the client brings up baggage. Maybe, they've connected with someone else and done a campaign and their experience has not gone very well. So they always want to bring that up. Last week, I was talking with a client about a potential digital marketing campaign, and that client said, I only want to pay based on what revenue you're going to bring me, right? Because the last time I engaged with someone like you, they promised me the whole world, right? They had said I would get X amount of revenue and nothing happened, right? And that person just ghosted them after a while. So a lot of times you have to pay the price for what other people failed to do. So if all of us on this webinar agree to not do that to each other, our lives would be so much easier, right? So, because as a media specialist or digital professional, we really have to do a great job of describing our services and what type of results come from that. So it's really important to discover what exactly is their marketing goal, right? How are they going to measure success? And do those two things align, right? Someone may say, I want to do branding and I'm going to measure it by how many forms are filled out on my site. Hey, great client to be. That's a really great idea, but I wanted to discuss, right, where programmatic display falls in the funnel and how you really can't track form fills with that, right? So a lot of times this is where we train our staff to really start to talk about the marketing funnel, right? Because at each step of a decision-making journey, clients have different questions and motivators. For all of our clients across all of their different campaigns, our goal is to find the most direct route, right? So if they want leads and form fills, I'm going to recommend products that are at the bottom of the funnel, right? So we prioritize the platforms we recommend all based on their goals. So where does programmatic display fall within the funnel, right? It's at the top of the funnel. So it's a broad reach. It's very similar to streaming radio, OTT, CTV, and other traditional media. And the best way to measure success with a broad reach, right, are impressions, site traffic, and goals in Google Analytics, right? Because you can set goals that help reinforce how successful your programmatic display campaigns are, right? Engagement, time on site, right? Maybe pages per session, and overall traffic, right? So a lot of times before the campaign starts, it's good to establish benchmarks. So that way you kind of know I need to get from here to there, and establishing those benchmarks really then help you in another side of the conversation of how much money do you invest, right? Whether that's for programmatic display or any other type of marketing based on what they want their desired results to be.
Jill, we had a question come in from the crowd here.
Ooh.
So when you're looking at these metrics that you're collecting, is there a standardized form that your reps are utilizing to communicate those metrics to whoever's optimizing the campaign?
That is such a good question, and it's one of the things we're going to be covering later. So to answer it shortly now, so here at the Post-Gazette, right, we can set up reports directly out of Google Analytics, right, whether it's from that client's Google Analytics accounts or ours, that we put that tag on their site. That will give them that source and medium report that will show how much traffic is being driven to their site, and then what the numbers are for each of the goals we set up. Right, for owned and operated, it's a little bit different. I can pull an ad out of the ad server, but really that's only going to give me impressions and click-through rate. Right, so a lot of this you really want to dive deeper down and get that Google Analytics report, but I'm sure, as we all know, not everyone has Google Analytics, or sometimes when you're working to a small to mid-size client, having them put Google Analytics on their site or even Google Tag Manager can take months, right? Because they're like, well, my nephew Joe did our website, but Joe's like at college, or you know what I mean? Joe's supposed to do it, but he just doesn't do it. So great question, and we'll look at that a little bit more later on.
Thank you, Jill. And if anyone
You're
else has any
welcome.
questions, feel free to send them to Organizer and we'll communicate them through.
Thank you, Mr. Organizer. So next we're going to talk about setting expectations, right? So to ensure that expectations for each buy or each campaign are made clear, you have to set expectations, right? And you need to provide a detailed breakdown of what would be delivered, right, to the advertiser, and what the goals and objectives are as a result of those plans. Now, certainly, and I'll repeat this again, it's really important to, right, verbally say what the expectations are, and then also follow up in a written format as well. Right, we all know we have to be honest and authentic, right? But we really also need to know the limits of display advertising. Remember, we just talked about how it's a broad reach, right? So you always want to make sure you're reinforcing that during your conversations. And you also, it's really important from a sales leadership and operations side of view that there's expectations set also on how much time is dedicated to each campaign for optimization, right? Because if you have a client who's spending $500, there's not a lot of data you can extract, right, on a daily basis to make changes. Now, if someone's spending, right, $500 a day, I can get a lot more data out of that and start to do better optimization for that. So it's really important to also create boundaries and expectations. We have what we call standard operating procedures, right? If it's this platform for this range of money, that gets optimized daily, right? Every other day, weekly, every other week, right? It's really something you have to talk about. One of the other things, you don't want to overpromise, right? You don't want to be like, hey, you know, the $1,000, you're going to get 1 million impressions. And on average, the click-through rate for your industry is XYZ, right? You always want to be cautious and not overpromise, right? So you can over-deliver. You also want to establish how often you're going to check in and discuss optimization, right, with your client. Like, right, maybe it is a client who's more engaged and you can send a weekly traffic report, right? Or maybe it's, hey, every Friday, let's just have a quick call at 10 o'clock. But right, even similar to boundaries for your campaign manager of how often they're optimizing things, us as sales reps and sales leaders also need to be mindful of, hey, I can't spend all of my time on this one client, right? Especially if their investment level is at X level. And you also really want to set internal expectations. Who is responsible for what, right? A salesperson is really focused on getting the sale. They're like, hey, I made it rain. Now it's your job, right? Which could be the case, right? Depending on what your setup is. But who is responsible for the details, right? Who fills out that intake form for your campaign manager, whether that's owned and operated or for extended reach or your agency products? What's the structure of communication between the sales rep and the campaign manager? And if you outsource fulfillment, what's the structure of communication there? Right? It's really frustrating from a sales rep perspective to be like, well, you have to go into this UI and fill out a ticket. Okay, well, I'm looking for an answer now and I kind of want to talk through it, right? Because sometimes maybe, you know, you're not using the right terms and then that ticket could go on for 2 weeks and you're like, man, now my campaign's at risk. Isn't there like a physical human I can talk to? So as I mentioned before, a lot of times programmatic display fails because they're just set and forget, right? You're like, well, you ordered 1 million impressions. I delivered on that. So it's really unclear at times between, right, sales and the client, but also sales reps and the campaign manager of whose responsibility is it to alert each other on a regular basis. You know, we've found here that having a regular call between campaign managers and sales reps, right, even if it's for 15 minutes, and it's, hey, this client, yep, delivery is going well. Here's what I noticed on Google Analytics, right? Oh, hey, it's towards the end of the month. Is client XYZ renewing for next month? Hey, just a reminder, I need new creative, right? Campaign managers think it's a sales rep's responsibility to document what optimization they want and how often, right? And remember, most campaign managers are not creative services people, right? So sometimes they're not going to say, hey, gosh, on that 320 by 50, there is no white space whatsoever. That ad is so crammed. And sales reps don't always know how to translate results, right? Even though digital marketing has been around for a while, not everyone knows how to read a report or to gain insights from that. So it's really important to make sure you have an internal structure established. We could have a whole separate conversation about Should your campaign managers be housed inside or should you outsource it? But the main takeaway is whatever your fulfillment processes or path, make sure there are guidelines, right, for sales reps and campaign managers so they understand who is responsible for what. And the other wild card, right, is campaign managers, right? Sometimes you have a campaign manager that wants to give you all that data and communicate, right, which is fantastic. And they tell you, hey, I found this, here's another great idea, right? But then at times you have campaign managers who are just putting the creative in, letting it serve, right? And they don't have that structure or knowledge level to be looking at the campaign and drawing insights from it. So it's a lot to juggle. Lots of risk, right? But also so much opportunity. And the opportunity is out there because we've had the chance to work with clients and really partner with them. As I mentioned before, right, you always want to find out kind of where your client's knowledge level is at. We've been able to help educate a lot of clients and become a really valuable resource to them, right? Like they've had Google Analytics on their site, but they've never looked at it, or they're afraid. They don't know where to look. What are they looking at, right? They're busy running a business, right? We've found, right? I love to get a Google Analytics report sent to me on a weekly basis, right? And you can call the client, hey, Bob, I wanted to let you know 7 out of your 10 traffic things that go to your website are all those ads I'm doing for you. He's like, really? Yeah, let me send you a screenshot so you can see it, right? And then they're willing to carve out more time to be educated about it. And then the really great thing is when that client starts a new business, or maybe it's a marketing person that you've helped elevate their knowledge, wherever they go, they call you because they know you communicate well and you built up that trust. So we've discussed pre-call planning, right? Make sure you get those Chrome extensions, make sure you discuss your client's marketing goals and how you're going to measure success, right? Remember, programmatic display is at the top of the funnel. And you want to set expectations both internally and externally. Okay, so now we're going to get on to part 2 of the webinar. Campaign setup for owned and operated and demand side platform.
Yeah,
so,
one question before you jump into this part
Mr.
2.
Organizer.
We had one come in from the crowd here asking, from your opinion, what is the level of knowledge an ad rep needs for analytics?
Well, I'm sure I have a few reps on this call. AJ Scarpesi could probably tell you. I think getting Google Analytics certified is great, right? But in order to really have knowledge, you really got to dive in and start looking at reports. So I believe you need to have the same, if not more, knowledge than any client that you're working with. Because you always want the client to realize you're the expert. And if they're mismatched, right, it's really hard because, sometimes teams are divided by territory or vertical, where, maybe sometimes we should consider aligning the client based on their digital knowledge to the reps who have that same, if not more, right? And it's hard because, as I've shared before, a lot of the stuff I've learned, it's almost like you have to self-teach yourself, because you can watch YouTube videos all day long, right? But until you actually like start to look at those reports and start to gain insights, none of it matters. And once you get that confidence and you can start to speak about it, it makes a huge difference, right? Clients are like, man, she's so smart. We're going to give her all of our business. Yes, please. Yes, please. So, Mr. Presenter, are there any more questions before we move on?
You are good to go for now, but I'll let you know as more come in.
Okay, thank you so much. So similar to setting expectations, campaign setup starts at the very beginning. So just like building Legos, there's lots of tiny pieces, right? And if you put one piece in the wrong place at the beginning, it causes a lot of work later. And if you don't address it right when you start, the picture's not going to look like the box. You're not going to keep it, and you're just going to knock it down, put it in the box, and put it away, right? And then eventually donate it to somewhere. So just like pre-call planning, campaign setup is really important at the very beginning, and being mindful of what you're doing, right? Both from a sales side and a campaign management side. Being mindful really helps set you up for long-term success and doesn't put any of your business at risk. So we'll talk about owned and operated. Now remember, some of the takeaways will be different for each of you because capabilities are based on the ad server that you use. Some items obviously will be a no-brainer, but we all need reminders to make sure we're staying at the top of our game. As I mentioned, we all sell the same boxes, right? Maybe my boxes are in a different place on my website than on yours, and maybe I have different publishing target, but it's still the same box. So a lot of what we'll be discussing are things you'll want to talk about internally, so then you can start to bring it to the table when you have that opportunity to gain new business. Right? Because the big difference is you as the sales rep and capabilities as a campaign manager. So our process of marketing fulfillment here, our campaign managers are in-house. As I mentioned, our ad server for Post-Gazette.com is Ad Manager 360 Premium. So some parts of this you may want to fade out on. I'm hoping you're just not on screen or on camera and not paying attention. If you are, that's, I'm not here to judge anyone. So as I mentioned, so many campaigns are just set and forget. So you really want to make sure, right, that you're mindful of what you're doing when you're ordering, right? And then optimization might depend on the campaign level investment. But no matter what the investment is, you can make a huge difference by getting this set up all right at the beginning. So obviously one of the most basic optimization, right, is A/B testing. A lot of us talk about it, but we actually don't do a lot of it, right? It's a lot of work because you have to remember, what was my variable? Which one worked better? Do I have enough data to make a decision, right? So creative matters with display ads. Every campaign is a little bit different, targeted to a different audience, maybe a different objective. There's no silver bullet that will transform things. So using A/B testing allows you to turn a run-of-the-mill design into a really effective campaign. Obviously, we all know the key elements are a clearly defined border, right? Colors in the design shouldn't be chosen randomly, right? They should capture the audience and convey the emotion you're attempting to evoke. And color should also reinforce the branding and reflect that industry of your client as well. And certainly you always want to use images to highlight the value of the product or make your eye more ad catching, right? A dog or baby doesn't need to be in every ad to be eye-catching. And at the same time, you really want those images to complement rather than distract from the core message. You always want to look at what is that call to action button or words, right? Remember way back when you used to have to be like, click here. People didn't know you had to click on the ad. Now people, they know it. So do you really need to put click here, right? Maybe it's something that's more emotional to get them to click that. And certainly always want to make sure you're using unique ad sizes, right? And when you order, you can order a smaller amount for 320 by 50s than say 320 by 50s rather than 300 by 250 or 300 by 600. So after you find the most compelling, creative, and effective language, right, you always want to do that split testing, one variable. And then you also want to determine, right, is my section targeting working? Maybe I should target this to sports. Maybe it should be to news. Maybe the campaign should be day parted, right? And what does that day parting look like? We had some campaigns more on the agency side that are day parted. In fact, we worked with a university that had a new program, and they had a limited window to get about 20 people signed up for it. And after a week, we reviewed their delivery reports from all campaigns, right? They did some paid social, they did AdWords and programmatic display. After we dug in, we found out that most of their respondents, so we had goals in GA set up, right? For more than just engagement, we actually had a form fill because they were doing AdWords, right? Paid search. And we found out that most of those people filled out forms between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. because they were targeting a techie person, right? So these techie people are online late at night, programming, writing code, and all that good stuff. So we decided to day part their campaign as well, right? Their programmatic display and even their paid social. So that way, more of those impressions served, right, between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. to capture those people and really use that money wisely. We also sometimes look at, does 1 month investment drive more traffic to the client's website and have higher engagement than, say, 1 day of rich media, which could be the same amount as a whole month? Which one gives them the more engaged traffic? So some other ways to optimize for owned and operated is by adding a frequency cap, right? Most of ours are by day. We don't do a ton by minute or hour, but you could, right? You just got to make sure, if it's a client and they do an insert to say only 5 zip codes, you might not want to bring up doing frequency capping for a digital campaign for only, say, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. because they're promoting, hey, stop by and pick up dinner, right? Because that's a really small audience. But maybe it's for a pizza company that has locations all throughout my DMA, and they're doing an insert, right? Maybe twice during that month. So maybe we talk about doing 4 days a week, doing a day parting campaign, because that would be another investment of, say, $1,000. Maybe I can be about $1,500. And certainly data segments, right? So if you use Ad Manager 360 and you look at the data segments, oh my gosh, it's almost overwhelming. When a rep wants to ask one of our campaign managers, they're like, hey, what data segments do we have? Well, what data segments do I not have, right? And a lot of times what I've found, because a lot of times, since I'm still a user in our ad server, which some of my campaign managers do not like that I can dig in there, I found that, yes, you can certainly use data segment as is, right? They are a homeowner. They are of this age, right? What I've also found is sometimes you can get better numbers and better engagement if you put is not, right? They are not a renter, right? If they're not a renter, more than likely they should be a homeowner. And if I know specifically for owned and operated what my readers look like, right? I want to be cautious of always adding a data segment because I already know the type of audience I'm going to be reaching, right? So I don't want to always limit it. Remember, it's a broad reach. But so when you're looking at the data segments, always think, because sometimes when you put data segment is and you get the avails back, you're like, gosh, that it kind of doesn't make sense sometimes, right? Because you have to remember, right? All data segments, it's from a third party, right? Is it really active? How true is it? So sometimes I use is not, right? And I do kind of opposite. Yes, Mr. Organizer.
We had a question come in on the A/B testing, asking about, and I think this is in reference to your when you brought up form fills, but what type of flags do you look at in analytics when measuring the effectiveness of a campaign?
What type of flags? So I think maybe what they might be asking, right, is what would be where I would stop doing something, like maybe if I look at analytics, and we're going to look at a little bit more ad server reports later on, but sometimes some red flags may be dropping a city instead of, you know what I mean? Say if you have 10 DMAs you're targeting, if I see one that doesn't have any click-throughs, I might remove that DMA, or I might drop a creative size or drop a data segment. Do you think that that's what they're asking?
I think the other piece would be the performance. Like, is it just clicks, or what other performance pieces do you look at to kind of evaluate?
So a lot of it, a lot of that is based on the goals that you set up in analytics, right? Time on site, right? A lot of times you can look at ad size and ad bounce rate, right? So people are just coming in and going back out, right? I then think, is it my creative? Maybe I'm not translating what they would be going to. And the person's like, oh, no. Or maybe, as we'll see, sometimes in some apps, right, gaming apps, you get a lot of click-throughs, but you don't get a lot of, right, engagement or additional pages. A lot of times, right, they're like, oh, I hit that on accident, right? How do I go back? I got to go back to my game.
I think that answers it, Jill. Thank you.
Good, you're welcome. So now let's talk about campaign setup for demand side platform. Now remember, everything's going to be different for everyone based on what DSP you have access to. So most companies focus on these categories, right? I want to do keyword contextual category, right? Geofencing, remarketing, using third-party data, addressable fencing, or device ID. But there's actually more ways, right? Like this isn't bad, right? But it is basic, right? This goes back to we all do this, right? Most of us have access to all of this. So let's look at some other things you can do, right? Preferably at the beginning of the campaign, not, at the end, right? So certainly you can do a blacklist, which is also can be referred to as, say, a block list. Or you can do a white list, and we're going to look at these, right, in depth a little bit. Oh, see, there's one error, that extra check. Dang it. You can also do a frequency cap, right? You can do day parting, right? Whether it's morning, afternoon, right? Or maybe it's like a little bit in the morning, some late in the day. Targeting options, like similar to some of the things we just looked at based on topics, custom intent or audience, and certainly keywords, adding and removing items. So why a blacklist, right? It's a quick way to optimize and pre-optimize and restrict campaigns from serving on apps or sites which you know you don't want to serve any impressions on from the get-go. Or if you review, you can always add more during the campaign, as it's a way to prevent additional impressions on serving on domains you don't want that campaign to serve on. And for blacklists, you can do it at a high organizational level, right? You can, no matter what campaign you put in that DSP, that list can automatically be applied to it, no matter who the client is or what line item it is. Or maybe you have a certain client and they have, you know, a certain block list that they don't want to be on these types of sites. And certainly this is one of those things we learned, you know, the hard way. So when we switched to a different DSP years ago, we were really anxious, like, oh, this DSP is gonna be the savior of the world. So once we started running campaigns, we started diving into the reporting. And here's the other thing you always want to remember. Whether you're doing, right, internal fulfillment or outsourced, you really want to be engaged on what type of reports am I getting and how much information am I getting, right? Because they can just send you a one-sheeter, has a pretty graph. Here's all your impressions by day. Here's your click-through rate and copies of the creative. Or you can say, no, I want top sites. I want top sites by city and by ad size, right? Because you kind of want to dig in, right? Just looking at impressions isn't much. So what we found when we switched to this DSP, we had a subsizable campaign, and we noticed that half of the impressions were being served on two apps, the alarm clock app and the flashlight app, right? Those are utility apps. People use them, right, for an alarm or to find something, right? They're usually not paying attention to the ads, right? So we decided to create a blacklist, not allowing those apps. And then the more we started looking at campaign performance, we're also like, gosh, why, you know, everything's being served on a gaming app, right? Because there's so much inventory, right? It's just crazy. So I know our clients weren't crazy about seeing, hey, your top sites was an alarm clock app or a flashlight app or XYZ game, right? So that's why we created the blacklist, so they wouldn't be on there. So these are some really great slides that you'll have access to on Monday. So, and it shows you where you can add a domain blacklist, right? So this is for Simplify. So if you do self-service with them, here's how you do it, right? Because and certainly I don't recall everything from the past, but I don't remember this being part of our conversation at the beginning of setup with Simplify. You know, there's so many pieces when you change DSPs, right? That it's just something, you know, they didn't bring up and we didn't think to ask it. But as soon as we're like, oh my gosh, we have to change this. Great. We did it at an organization level. And then you can also do it at a campaign level. And then inside Google Ads display, you can apply that blacklist at your MCC account level, right? So this shows you exactly where to do it for that placement exclusion list, right? And you can just paste it in. In addition, at the MCC level blacklist, you can also manage placement at the individual campaign level, right? So you just select a campaign, go to placement, where ads are shown. You just click on see where your ads appear. And then from there, you can click on where ads shown, and you could see a list of all of the domains that the ad had served on. And then from there, you can actually exclude them from the ad group or the campaign level, right? So this is one of those things where you have to have parameters in-house of, are my campaign managers optimizing, right? Because at a sales level for a sales rep or sales leader, this is a great thing to start talking to your clients about when they say, I've tried programmatic before, it doesn't work. Oh, yes, Mr. Client, we hear that a lot. You know, let me tell you about our standard operating procedures.
Jill, we had a question come in. Do you exclude your owned and operated as a blacklist for your programmatic campaigns?
We do not. We do not. So, good question, though. So, and so here's some additional optimization, right? At the account level, you can do content blocking. So there's 5 options there. You can select all 5, or certainly, you know, depending on what type of client it is, say maybe it's an auto dealer, they certainly don't want to be serving ads on any auto accidents articles. So, and you're also able to block certain types of content at the account level. And there's more types of content blocking at the campaign level, right? So under settings, content exclusion, right? You'll see the middle column, which we already talked about, but then there's 2 other ones as well. Interesting enough, Google does not let you block games anymore, right? It's too much inventory. They need to monetize that. So you really have to use your blacklist and start adding to it, or wait until the campaign starts to serve, right? And then start to exclude them. So these 2 next slides, they're just for reference for the campaign managers or folks once we send the deck out, right? Wanted to make sure you had tools. So next, on to a whitelist. So if you have a brand safety requirement or a specific industry, some clients give us a whitelist and say, we only want to be served on these sites, right? Can be highly focused. However, you can lose optimization levels, right? So you just got to make sure you communicate that with the client in advance. Usually if a client has a whitelist, they already know most of this, right? Potential drawbacks, low CTR and high CPC, right? Cost per click. We do have, you know, some educational clients that use this, some more niche clients that, you know, they're like, we only want this audience. And that's one of the ways we work with them on. So in Simplify, you can enable a whitelist. It's the same area that the blacklist gets applied, but you just upload the allow list. So you can certainly, for a blacklist, right, we do have a Google spreadsheet that our campaign managers have shared with each other. So we can always reference it. Sometimes, you know, it's overall by organization and then different tabs for some of our clients, right? And you can do the same thing for your whitelist by client, but the challenge is keeping it up to date, right? And then it also goes back to the who does what, right? When a client gives you a whitelist, they usually don't give you the URL and the app URL, right? There has to be some legwork. because you want to make sure you have enough inventory to be able to invest the money they give you, right? So sometimes you have to say, hey, you had these 5 sports sites, right? We find their corresponding app, or here are some other sites like them. Can we add it to your list? In Google Ad Displays, here's where you can add a whitelist under placements. And certainly other optimization, right? Similar to what we've talked about before. Frequency cap, day parting, viewability, which is going to become more and more important, right? Right now, a lot of agencies ask for this, but certainly I think once more information and people's knowledge level increases, you know, your local retail accounts are going to start asking, what's my viewability on that? And then certainly you can add or remove AdWords, or keywords, I mean. So here's where in Google Ads Display, you can add the frequency cap, right? Ours is usually 4 times per day per user, right? Sometimes for remarketing, that might be higher or lower. Here's where in Google Ads Display, you can add an ad schedule or do day parting, turn off hours you don't want. You can control on a per hour or per day of week basis, right? So maybe you want the ads to serve more Monday through Friday and maybe less Saturday and Sunday, right? Maybe something to consider, right? Summer is supposed to be here, but a few of us who were on the call early talked about how it's snowing here in Pittsburgh. But maybe in the summer, right, you could do a campaign where they do more programmatic display during the week, and then on the weekend, you're selling them streaming radio, right? Both are broad reach. Why not? And here's some additional targeting, right? Ad placement, browsers, device. We don't do a ton of browsers or device type, right? Or operating systems, but you could. Oh, and here's viewability, right? So usually use it when a client requests it. And as I mentioned, I think this will be more and more important. All right, so we talked about campaign setup, right? Best to do pre-optimization, right? Sometimes we forget about being able to have that block list and doing things like that. So certainly making sure you get detailed reporting, whether, right, fulfillment's in-house or out-house, right? You want to dive into those, see what's going on. So on to part 3, gaining insights from delivery reports. So one of the things that you'd always want to do with any campaign is making sure you're looking at every platform they're doing, right? So if they're doing search, right, paid social, and programmatic, you can gain insights from each of those and apply it to the other, right? For programmatic display, you really want to look at those Google Analytic reports as well, right? Because that's where you dive deeper, right, into site engagement, pages per session, bounce rate, time on site. Let's see. So I was very mindful of what reports I was sharing with my colleagues across the state. So some of them you're like, gosh, that doesn't give me a lot of data. Some clients don't want their data shared, right? So these are all reports I've had pre-permission to share with them, and I've used it for other webinars that we do. So they're not gonna, like, you know, gain a ton from it, but you're gonna at least see what type of reports you should be getting and then start to look at, right? So certainly, you know, you can look at insights by day of week. But remember, as I mentioned, you got to have enough information to make a change, right? When you look at this, it's like, more ads were served on Saturday and Sunday. Hey, that's great, right? But click through and average CPC, there's really no big difference. So I don't know if I would change anything here, right? I would be interested though if you looked at GA and then you went back and looked at, did they have print ads this day? Was that higher than that day? And maybe that could help you get more of your traditional media sale, right? You got to put all the pieces together. You can have reports pulled by ad name, right? And this is critically important to make sure that when your campaign manager puts it in, right, the DSP or even in your owned and operated ad server, that you have a naming convention, right? And just as important, that URL needs to be UTM'd, right? We could have a whole nother webinar, I'm sure, about how to UTM, naming conventions, and why it's important. I can tell you with that client, Bob, I referenced earlier, Bob does business with other companies in the area. And Bob said, what about my ads with X partner? Can you see them? And I was like, Bob, they're here, but because they're not UTM'd, I can't uniquely identify them. He's
Joe,
like,
can you
what?
briefly just go over what a UTM is for everyone?
It does not stand for, a lot of people think it stands for Universal Tracking Measure, but I forget the exact words. I'd have to Google it. But it's a way where you can identify what ad it is, right? Maybe you say, right, let's think of an ad. XYZ company, right? And then you have a naming convention for the creative name, right? Maybe open office space, ad size, and then product, right? So then when you look in Google Analytics, you can see what's really driving traffic to my site.
And
So
do you have a
these
good
reports
tool to
were,
create? Do you have a good tool to create UTMs, like a site you can go to, or?
there is, I can reference one. Ours now, we have a document shared with all of our staff on how our naming conventions work. You know what I mean? Because we like it to be, I believe it's campaign, client name, campaign name, ad size, product, if I'm remembering correctly. So, but there are tools out there that you can have them help create it. But here's the thing that also goes back to a few other points. Whose job is it to create the UTM, right? And we've done it, you know, the campaign managers used to do it. We used to only do it for agencies, right? Agency buys with Ben. And then we're like, no, we need to do this for owned and operated. Oh, and then, you know, we have an e-paper and that has click-throughs, right? We need to do it for that as well. So we used to have the sales reps had to put it in the intake form of what the UTM should be, right? And then now we just have the campaign managers do it, because campaign managers are a little bit more mindful of the process, right? Us as sales reps, we're like, hey, we got the sale, you figure out the UTM, right? Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I don't mind that. So definitely something you want to make sure you're doing. So like on this report, I did add viewability, right? So maybe some of them with 0 viewability, I might start to, you know what I mean? I might start to put a viewability filter on there, but you also have to be mindful that the campaign can fulfill, right? Because we don't want to miss out on that opportunity to service that client and fulfill their investment. Ooh, here's one by top sites. Right? Depending on who the client is and what their creative is, I may exclude that jigsaw puzzle and the dominoes, right? That's a gaming app, right? I'm not for sure. They have really high click-through rate only because the impressions were really small. right? So you have to look at every number, because if you just look at that click-through rate, you're like, oh man, this one had 66.67. That's phenomenal. We only served 3 ads and 2 of them people clicked on, right? And it was a gaming app. So I don't know. I would probably exclude those or add those to my blacklist. This one, the bottom 2 have the highest CTR, still not a lot of data, right? But maybe also the insights that you get, you can make a play for a complementary product, right? So maybe this is a good place to talk to your client about content marketing, right? Because the insights can be way more than about optimizing for programmatic display, right? We've given clients advice on, man, you get a lot of traffic with these keywords. You might want to do, a page educating people about it and do content marketing, right? Data sells. And it's so easy. You just got to be educated enough to translate it. And this one is by top cities, right? Again, not a ton, but just another way to start to look at information. But here's the best way to start to look at data, right? You want to go deeper than an ad server, right? You want to start to look at the traffic on their site, right? So you always want to look at a source medium report. And you can actually, you can schedule these reports to be pushed out to you. But remember, just because you're pushing the data out, whether to your client or a sales rep, it doesn't mean they actually look at the report, nor know how to interpret it, right? If I'm asking a campaign manager for a report, the sales rep and I both get it. After I get it, the next time I have a connection with that sales rep, I'm, depending on what level of education, I'm trying to share with them, this is what I see. Do you see that, right? Here's a chance, right, to get a bigger sale, right? Reinforce our partnership with them. And you can have this report boiled down deeper, right, to the day of week and ad size. And under that source medium, this is where it can be your ads with the UTM, right? Imagine if you have that by day of week, right? You have a great story to tell people. So we're coming to the end of our time. So we've talked a lot, right? Or I guess I've talked a lot about the importance of managing clients' digital expectations. And then campaign setup for owned and operated and DSPs and gaining insights. But again, I think my overall message is we all sell the same box, right? What's really different is what you bring to the table, whether you're a sales leader, sales manager, or campaign manager. So having that digital knowledge to go deeper is definitely going to pay off. Mr. Organizer, any question?
We did have one comment. We have a couple here. One was asking for, when you're looking at analytics on a branding campaign, what do you look for in a successful campaign?
Ooh, I would benchmark it compared to before the branding campaign started. So I like to do, say, a 3-month window look back. However, you always want to understand if they were doing anything during that 3-month window, right? That you're going to benchmark it against, because you might make that window smaller or larger. I would look at overall traffic, right? Both new users and, is organic traffic up? I would also want to make sure I look at the bounce rate and time on site.
Great. We had a question coming about setting that optimization schedule that you had stated on there. Is that by client or is that a universal schedule?
You do it by client level.
We have one more in here. Let me find it in my chat here. What is the analytics you look at for branded content?
Oh, I would say time on site or time on that article, right?
So
Because
focus on that.
yeah, that's how you know people are actually, right, being engaged with it.
And another one popped in here. What standard do you hold your reps to for understanding reporting, and how do you measure that?
Oh, that's a unique question. You know, what I like to do, Matt, is you you can teach how to do this, right? Like if someone has that desire to want to learn, I can teach them. I can't teach them that desire to learn or the attitude to have towards it. So our approach is to meet people where they are, understand where they want to go, and walk beside them and show them. So kind of a fluffy answer, but you know, it's a unique situation, right? Our team here, right? We have varied levels. And what I want to do is help people get better, right? Every day, every week, right? Because once they start to see that traction with one client, they're more open to like learning and doing stuff on their own time. Wouldn't you agree, Vanessa?
Yes, absolutely. As far as with my team, we meet with the clients every month and review their reports. But like Jill was talking about, not every salesperson is at the same level. So, and some grow faster and understand the data points better than others. And so we just continue to try to work with them to get them to an acceptable level for the client, because obviously that's important. But like she said, we try to meet the rep where they're at, because we have various ranges of expertise, even from me. I mean, I sat down here and wrote down some notes today that I just learned from Jill. It was like, wow, I forgot all about this, you know? So yeah, that's kind of what we do.
So I'm waiting on some other questions to come in, but I have one I'd like to ask, Jill, from my side here.
Oh,
So,
I hope it's a tough one.
and take this in the sense this is a safe environment of other peers in here. But looking back
Okay.
over the last 5 years, what's the biggest mistake looking at analytics and reporting that's been made that you could have avoided in hindsight?
Mm. Uh, Setting up the goals, right? Because it's more than just these impressions and
Mhm.
click-throughs.
So is
So,
that in the
and
sense of talking to the client ahead of time, or my understanding is analytics is not retroactive either, and I don't think that's
right,
changed. You
correct.
can't go
Yeah,
back in
yeah,
time
yeah.
to change
And
that.
even some clients, Matt, I never should have taken that buy until they agreed to give me access or put my Google Analytics on that site. I know some companies are like, we won't move forward until, we have access. And it goes back to that, hey, I'm so excited for the sale.
Mhm.
I'll worry about that later. And then later comes and I'm like, oh my gosh, there goes that buy. Shame on me. Shame on me.
Once we don't deliver, it's really hard to ever get them back. So
Yes. And then, you know what I mean? And then you lose other things. They go someplace else. They're not going to call you. So,
I hear you. So key takeaway there is make sure you have your everything lined up before the campaign begins. Have the
yes,
tags in place, have expectations set, communication with both your optimization team internally and the client, have all that lined up before you begin.
correct.
And that's so easy to say it that way, right? It worked
Yeah,
perfectly
yeah.
every time in
Like,
real life.
yeah, today I'm going to do everything right. Tomorrow I might forget something.
Well, we don't have any other questions on the queue right now. So Jill, thank you. And Vanessa, if you want to close this out while we're waiting on any questions to come in, that'd be great.
Well, thank you so much for attending today's session. Jill, this was fantastic. I learned a lot, and I work with you and I learned a lot. So thank you. It's such great, valuable information, and it's actually given me a couple of insights that I got to go back and look at some of my campaigns and make sure they're working the way they should be. So the next two sessions in the advertising symposium are build better relationships with advertising agencies and boost your share of advertising business, starting at today at 3 p.m. And proven and successful revenue generating ideas start tomorrow at 11 a.m. So if you're not registered for these sessions and would like to attend, please contact the Pennsylvania News Media Association by emailing events@pnanewsmedia.org or visiting the PNA website's contact page. So thank you all for attending today. And